a lot of people, Mayor, don't understand how the demographics have shifted in Atlanta. When we talk about other cities, Washington, D.C., people talk about how the explosion of growth in Prince George's County, well, a lot of people left Washington, D.C. Same thing here. All of people say they live in Atlanta, they actually live in Lithonia, or they might live in Gwinnett and other areas. And so how has the demographic shifts of African Americans moving to other places, bolstering those cities, impacted the voting population that's in the city?
Well, when I was elected in 1993, the African American percentage was almost 70%. Now it's 47%. So there has been.
African Americans are 47%
in Atlanta, correct.
The population or the voting age?
Population.
So Atlanta, the city, is no longer a majority black city?
Correct. But the leading candidates for mayor in the election, which will be in about 2.5 months, are African Americans. One male, one female. One, the former mayor, Kasim Reed, and another who is the president of the city council, Felicia Moore. So I think you will continue to see African American leadership in the mayor's office for a number of years to come. And in fact, let me just also say that with the migration of African Americans in the surrounding counties, it's been a great positive, because in all those jurisdictions, they have been turning out tremendous numbers of voters, and they have changed the dynamic of those counties, which were largely suburban, some almost rural. Cobb County, where the Braves Stadium is located, that's now almost entirely run by African American leadership, mostly African American female leadership. Gwinnett County, DeKalb County, all these, Henry County, Clayton County, these are suburban counties, and they were totally run by whites for many, many years, and very conservative, by the way, and that's all changed. So even though the dynamic for Atlanta itself has changed somewhat, those suburban counties who turned out in great numbers to shift the entire paradigm for the U.S. Senate with Warnock and Ossoff all came from this outward migration. But still, the fundamentals are from Atlanta. That's where the roots grow. This is where all people know that you vote all the time. Runoffs. The only place in the country where African Americans turn out in runoffs is in Atlanta. That's why Kasim Reed won by only 500 votes in a runoff. That's why Keisha Lance Bottoms won 500 votes in a runoff. African Americans turn out all the time because that's the history of Atlanta. Dr. King, the civil rights movement, the colleges and universities, everything about Atlanta is geared towards making certain that we understand how precious the right to vote is. And of course, you know, we lost the paragon, John Lewis, back in July of last year. Think how much he wanted to understand that voting was fundamental. And of course, there's the John Lewis Voting Rights Bill, which is still bottled up in Congress. If we can get something that will stop these places, Georgia, Arizona, Texas, and these insane efforts to try to stop people from voting, it's almost it's un-American. But yet they're trying to do that in some way as a tribute to Donald Trump's efforts to try to undermine the legitimacy of the election. So African Americans are going to have an African American mayor in Atlanta. There's almost no doubt about that. But the migration outward has made a real difference also. So I think you can rest assured that Atlanta and perhaps Georgia, again, will play a leading role in the politics of the country.
We often talk on this show about the role that voting plays. And then I get people all the time who say, man, you always talk about voting and we don't see it. And what I'm constantly trying to do is connect the dots, trying to get people to understand that there's a direct correlation between who gets elected, contracts, services. Maynard Jackson wins in early 70s. African Americans were getting 0.0012% of all city contracts. Right. And so you don't have the economic shift in Atlanta without combining the political power that shifted the economic paradigm.
Yeah. But, you know, as the mayor just stated, you know, we've created new cities around Atlanta also. The city of South Fulton is 92% African American, and it's the 4th largest city in the state. And we just created that 5 years ago. And and what has happened with that, and with all of the migration that he talked about into these other cities and these other counties, we have been able to change the dynamic around the economic piece because we now control it. We control
and again, for the people who don't understand, we talk about the economic piece. We're talking about bond elections. We're talking about all type of contracts that are coming out of the city, out of the school district, out of the county.
Yeah, even simple things. You know, the school systems, the city, the government, got to buy toilet paper. Got to buy it from somebody. You know, so if we had a contractor, a black contractor selling toilet paper, you know, he'd be doing pretty good right now, because I'm assuming everybody uses it. So.
Yes, that's a good bet. That's a good bet.
Yeah, so
there are very few guarantees in life. Wiping your ass is one.
That's
See,
my point.
this show is called Roland Martin Unfiltered,
Yeah.
so we can say wiping your ass, it ain't no problem.
But that's my point.
Because it's black owned.
We need to own, but that's what we need to do with more things. We need to own it. And one of the issues that we have in Georgia, I'm a state representative, so the issue that you just talked about for Atlanta, that exists in the state. We have less than 2% of the state contracts going to African-American businesses, which is crazy. We represent, we spend $26 billion in state money, and then another $26 billion in federal money. And less than 2% of that goes to African-American companies. So you're right. We've got to find ways to own it and to be able to control who gets the contracts. And you do that by turning out the vote and putting people in place that make the decisions around contracts and all the other things you're talking about.
And the reason I brought that up, because what has happened is, when you talk about those state contracts, you've had the state folks who have been desperately trying to get hold of that airport.
Well, interestingly enough, the airport, which is named half for the person who really was responsible for the growth of our airport, Maynard Jackson, every brick, every flight has all been done by African-American mayors, starting with Maynard Jackson all the way through. So when you see the busiest airport in the world and you understand the billions and billions of dollars of contracts, of those people who work in and around the airport, all as a result of the African-American leadership coming from the mayor's office. But also, let's go back to the fundamentals about why it's important to have these elections and voting. Because in each of these places that you talked about, Roland, they are electing African-American district attorneys. So the fundamental issue of justice, which almost always comes from district attorneys. You know, there's so much talk about the federal government but these decisions are made on a local level, and they're made by DAs, and these DAs really have no oversight. So the fact that Cobb County,
because they are the chief law enforcement officer in each one of those counties.
and they are a power unto themselves. But now with these elections in these suburban counties, who were almost invariably, they were white and conservative and more likely Republican, that's all changed now. So we're now seeing a paradigm shift, and that makes a real difference in the dispensation of justice. So I think you have a real appreciation for what Atlanta has meant and what it now means for these outlying counties who are now being changed fundamentally. And I will continue to say that this election is going to be essential for where we go as a country. I believe we are now in an existential battle for the heart and soul of America. It's not just the mask or vaccines. It's about whether or not we're going to move forward or whether or not we're going to allow Trumpism to take us back. And so I think that's what you have to understand. The voting in California today on a recall election, all of this is about the efforts to undermine democracy. Mm-hmm. And every election now, think about this. If the Republicans win, it's a good election. If they lost, it was stolen. So I mean, that's a heads I win, tails you lose. I mean, there's no way you could ever have any sort of assurance that we're going to have the kind of democracy that we've had and relied on in the past. That's why voting is so fundamental.
And of course, this was ground zero earlier this year for the voter suppression bill that went through the legislature. Because, and look, it's a fight for democracy, but I also keep laying out that we're also battling white fear. That what this is really about is scared to death that black people are turning out, scared to death that Native Americans are turning out, others are turning out, and they see what is coming because they're going to have to do in other parts of the country what white folks in Atlanta learned. Yeah. They had to share the power and the money.
Yeah, exactly. And we're in a situation, you know, when democracy was working for white folks, they like democracy. It's not working for them
Right.
anymore. So, I mean, deep in my heart, I really believe that they're trying to change the form of government that we have.
Oh, no. That's not just your heart. No, that's in reality.
Yeah.
That's what the takeover of the Supreme Court was about.
Yeah.
That's what control of the federal bench was about. Because if you do have black folks who are in power, if they sue, they go to the federal courts, they can always throw those laws out.
They throw them out. And that's what this is all about. It's changing it so that they can stay in control. You know, we were talking the other night, and it's almost like apartheid. You know, that they want to take us back to what South Africa used to be, and be able to control it as a minority. You know, when you look at this filibuster that they're doing in Washington, that's the minority controlling the majority.
Right.
And so they're trying to do that in Washington, they're trying to do it here in Georgia, they're trying to do it all over the country, and people better pay attention. You know, we were talking earlier, and I'm scared to death about what's happening in California. If they get rid of that governor, and that black guy goes in there, and he changes the form of government that we have in Washington, I mean, a black person being responsible for changing the balance of power in the United States against black people, it's hard for me to fathom that.
Oh, well, first of all, Larry Elder is one of the most evil, demented individuals out here, and he's a brother that Harriet Tubman would have left behind.
Yeah, or thrown. He said, keep him.
Or shot him. And I ain't I don't mince words. I don't play. You know, I saw some tweet by Megyn Kelly. She talks about how dare these folks criticize this man's daddy went through Jim Crow. I was like, well, clearly his damn son didn't learn nothing.
He didn't learn nothing
and so they must went to the school of Clarence Thomas being raised. I don't know what the hell's going on there, but the thing that the last question for both of you is this here though. I believe though that there are a lot of people out there who say, okay, I hear you, but they don't see or feel the impact of voting. And so...
No, they do. They actually do.
Well,
they just don't appreciate it
well,
because
but-
it's the
well,
schools, it's the,
right, but,
it's the justice.
But that has to be properly explained because
Yes.
what I've said is it's not going to work to say somebody died for your right to vote. They like, okay, sorry, that ain't flying with me. And so I fundamentally believe that we have to have a resurgence of citizen education workshops and class that walk folks through that because, again, for that person who doesn't watch this show or they're not reading the newspaper, they're not looking at sites, they're just kind of like, man, I don't see it, I don't feel it, all this stuff sound the same. And so we've got to walk folks through that, and that means going back to those neighborhoods and going back to precinct captains and block captains and literally retraining because you do not have the level of citizenship training in school that you used to have.
But that's how Ossoff and Warnock were elected here in Georgia. It was a door-to-door effort. It was re-educating. It was getting people back to the polls, the old fundamental ways of making certain that you're contacting your neighbors, your relatives.
Right.
And that's what actually happened in Georgia.
Right, but what I'm saying is that has to happen when the election is over and then in the off year. And saying, we need you coming to the city council meeting, the state board, the school board meeting, the state legislature, because, again, we're very good to me at mobilizing around the election. But the election is the end of one process. It's the beginning of another.
Yeah, we've got to do it year-round is the bottom line, and we got to do it early on. They're not teaching these kids anything about black history in schools.
Well, they're fighting it.
They're fighting
right.
They're fighting
Which is why we got to relaunch
Yes.
freedom schools.
Yes.
Yes.
And we've got to have grandma, grandpa having, come to Jesus meeting right at home. And we need to invite the neighbors over. Just to your point, we've got to go back to the way we used to do it, where we're touching people face to face, and we're educating people on what's going on in this country. Because right now, we're in trouble.
But ultimately, demographics are destiny. And what that means is that the fact that more young people are voting, Asians are voting Democratic, Hispanics are voting Democratic, more African Americans are turning out and voting, more suburban women are voting Democratic. It's destiny. And that's why you're seeing the efforts to try to literally stop people from voting. But that's not going to work ultimately. We just got to make certain, as you say, to educate and motivate and get people to the polls.
Well, it's destiny in some places. The Texas Monthly just had an article how a number of Latinos in South Texas
Yes.
flipped in a huge way, 200% and 300%, going from Hillary Clinton voters to Donald Trump voters. And Democrats were just sort of assuming that was going to continue. But many of
But
them...
they're not monolithic. They're not
Right,
monolithic.
right. But many of them are identifying with white values as opposed to minority values. But again, that's where, to me, the education has to come in. And so, at the end of the day, for us, we can't wait on anybody else. And we got to maximize our numbers. Gentlemen, I certainly appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment.
All right, folks, CEEK.com is a black-owned company founded by Mary Spiel. It's a virtual reality company where you can actually go there, look at their virtual reality content. A couple of devices they actually have for sale that you might be interested in. First off, their VR headset allows for you to slide your phone right in and experience that virtual reality content on their site or watch a 360-degree video. Also, there are 360-degree headphones, tremendous bass, you can use it for gaming, Bluetooth, phone calls, you name it. Folks, you can get these two at CEEK.com using this promo code RMVIP21, RMVIP21. You buy one or the other, or even both, a portion of the proceeds come back to us here at Roland Martin Unfiltered. And so we want you to check out CEEK.com and give it a try.